Hey, you shiny plastic people. This week, on the way to the Denab system, Sabine puts on her tabi boots, grabs a bokken, and trains with Huyang and Ahsoka. Hera talks to some politicians and has a little bit of family time. Ahsoka goes skywalking outside the planet, Seatos, and so much more that we'll be discussing this week because we're talking Tano. Hey, you guys! I am the fantastic Chris Plastic, and joining me this week is my much better half. It's Jessi. Jessi, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So let's say hello to the chat real fast. We have Brick Something, who was my co-host last week. Thank you for joining us, Brick. We're live this week. It's a small miracle. Jessi, before we get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with Star Wars? How'd you get into it?
Well, a long time ago in what seems like a galaxy far, far away, I was a young child in the 80s. And as we know, that's when we had our original trilogy. And I had cousins who were 5 and 6 years older than me. And so I was introduced through them through watching the movies. Either we would go rent like the giant VCR and watch them. I believe that my mom took me to see Empire in the theaters as a wee little Jessie. And after that, I think Star Wars kind of fell out of favor, but it was on USA all the time. So it was easy to catch it on a snowy day, a snowy weekend, and I loved it. Hanging out with my older cousins, we spent a lot of time watching Star Wars, playing, with our lightsabers, and just kind of reenacting the movies, and just kind of were a little bit obsessed with it then. Um, and the prequels came out and there was a little bit of a boom. I was excited to go see him. I got to do that. And then it's always been part of my life in one way or another.
Awesome. That's really cool. I know, I think of the two of us, you are maybe the bigger Star Wars fan.
Maybe at one time. I think more modern Star Wars has been more your thing. Not that I don't like it or engage in it, but I think it really kind of got you as as you started watching the Clone Wars and Rebels, and I'm new to this part of Star Wars myself.
Oh, for sure. Brick says hello.
Hello, Brick. I recognize you from hanging out with Chris Plastic on his channel and yours as well.
So let's go ahead. Before we really get into the episode, we should let people know there will be spoilers. The sirens are going. Rick gets to hear it. Nice and quiet for us. All right, like I said, we kick off in hyperspace as Sabine, Ahsoka, and Huyang find themselves on the way to Denab, doing some really cool training stuff. Any thoughts on that, Jess?
I thought it was pretty cool to see Sabine doing the lightsaber training with Huyang. Is that right?
Yes.
See, I'm a newbie to this part of our world. So, a lot like what we've seen in the past, but a new way to do some of the lightsaber training. So it was nice to see her working on that.
Oh, for sure. And then we see kind of a twist on the blaster visor.
Yeah, thinking way back to A New Hope when Luke is starting to learn to use the Force in the back of like to say in the way back, of the Millennium Falcon as they're traveling around. He's got on the blinding mask and is using the orb to work with the Force, and she's got the similar mask on, but a whole new kind of twist on it for me. With just the stick and Ahsoka kind of coaching her through trying to feel where she's at and being really in touch with the Force and others around her.
So I didn't know this. I had to look it up. Ahsoka calls that Zatoichi, which is actually a Japanese tale of a blind swordsman.
Okay.
by the name.
Which
So,
fits into our lore, our traditional Star Wars lore.
well, absolutely, and that's the big inspiration for Lucas. I know we went to a costume exhibit years ago, and there was lots of Japanese illustrations and how they kind of fit together.
Yeah, that very first, set of the art to base our costumes for A New Hope on, were really interesting to see, like, Vader as a samurai and then seeing the evolution as they worked out the costuming for the movie.
Oh, absolutely. And then, of course, Ahsoka and Sabine have a sit down and talk about, you know, maybe moving training a little bit faster, but of course, that's not how any of this works.
No, and as you know, Chris, my job is to train people.
That's right.
So I train all of the new people that come to my department. I'll probably leave them nameless for now. And from the get go, I'm used to that. Like people come in and they're ready to go. They're ready to start their new careers, their next chapter, and they want to go from A to Z and not do all this the development in between. They want to get to the fun part, and kind of the more sexy part. They end the end, as you would say, and I totally see that in Sabine. Like, let's get things moving. And I'm sure
Absolutely.
Ahsoka, myself as well as a teacher, is like sometimes like, let's just get them to the part where where they're really in it, and we can act more as peers. But we gotta do the middle part, right?
That's right. It's a journey, not a race
Yeah,
or a
absolutely.
marathon. Mixing
A
metaphors.
race.
I'm good at
Yeah,
that. That's why we're a couple. I
that's
got you
right.
in that way. Um, so I believe at this point we do cut to Hera, who is talking to some senators about trying to get some resources to help track down Thrawn and potentially stop an incoming potential attack from Imperial remnants.
Yes. Um, So again, not to bring my work into everything, I didn't plan on it till now, but like I feel her pain going to the powers that be and asking for more resources, more money, increase my budget so we can get what we need to done. And I totally see that happening with her, and they're kind of like, yeah, I don't think so. I do that every day.
Sure. I mean, we both live some of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course,
Any
you got
public servants out there know exactly what we mean.
absolutely. And of course, we always have that boss who doesn't have the experience that we do, and it's just frustrating, and you want to choke them. And we definitely see Hera dealing with that.
Yes.
Then we have a nice moment with Hera and her son, who wants to be a Jedi someday. I kind of wonder if he knows who his father is.
Hard to say at this point. But don't all kids wanna be a Jedi at some point? I know I did.
I did. At that point, the Jedi is more legendary than ever, right? They fell,
Absolutely.
the Empire grew, and then one lone Jedi named Luke Skywalker brought down the entire Empire. I mean, we know that Kanan and others were there, but Luke gets the mythology, the legend in Star Wars.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and, I'll take a little side trip with this too. Like I said, I wanted to be a Jedi, and when I was a kid and, my older cousins were males, and so, all of the Jedis that we see in that original trilogy are males, and so when the sequels came out, when we went to see A Force Awakens, and I'll tell your viewers that I went into A Force Awakens with zero spoilers. I wouldn't walk down the toy aisle. I would wait in the lobby when we would go see other movies just in case I would see a trailer.
It was a
I went
little
in completely
obnoxious.
blind. Yeah, but I wanted the experience I had when I was 4 or 5 years old, and I got it, and it paid off really big for me because to see Rey as the hero and the Jedi and come up like that it really was meaningful for me because I felt represented. That little 4 or 5-year-old me was like, yeah, and that was super important. And so, I get Jason wanting to be a Jedi, because I was right there with him.
100%. So we cut back as they are back on the ship talking to Hera, who's given the bad news that reinforcements aren't coming.
Yeah, that's always a bummer to hear.
It's rough, and especially when you come from Rebels where they just did things.
Yeah, and as we know throughout all of our Star Wars, our scrappy rebels can do a lot with little, and we know we're headed right back into that zone for them. And we've built some trust. We're ready to take it on as it comes at us, even without those reinforcements that we absolutely need.
Completely. And Hera's message gets cut off because we have entered, according to Huyang, the Denab system. They
Yes.
come out of hyperdrive early, standard Jedi protocol, and come in to see a massive ring, which is just a beautiful visual, I thought.
Yeah, it took me a minute. I was like, what's going to happen with this? Is it, we see the shields like from Rogue One, is it something like that that's going to prevent them from moving forward? What is going on with it? And then right away, we jump into starting to learn a little bit more about that ring.
That's right. I think Huyang said that looks like a giant hyperspace ring.
Yep.
But of course, they're under attack by some really interesting looking fighters that look like they came right out of World War II. But space.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Well, and also, they're so they look bolted together, riveted together, not the sleek ships of Naboo.
Yeah, and if we think back to some of what we've seen in the more recent Disney series, we see some of that kind of like, hey, that looks like something that's real from our history. We think about the Moped Gang in Boba Fett. That it kind of reminded me of that, where it's just kind of plucked out of real life and placed there with maybe some different paint and stuff to look, similar. It's kind of a wink to me to do our real world.
Well, and I think it's funny. We were at that Sound of Star Wars panel, and he talked about how the I think it was the TIE fighter noise was pulled from World War II fighter pilots and mixed.
Yeah.
So it's got to be a nice wink to that, where I'm just trying to put together two things that aren't really related.
You know what? It works for me.
That works. Then, after a little bit of a dogfight, they get closer to the ring where the turbo lasers are put in work by Morgan Elsbeth. That gold ship is kind of a neat visual. We don't really see that much ostentatious designs in Star Wars.
No, it's completely kind of a little bit out of left field. Like I said, it took me a minute to try to figure out what's going to happen with that. What is it going to be? Because it's different from everything we've seen thus far.
Absolutely. The Ahsoka ship is knocked out of commission, but not blown up. So with the fighters just breathing down their neck, Ahsoka goes for a little bit of a skywalk.
They better not change her name to Ahsoka Skywalker.
I think people might lose their minds if that happened. So but what a very cool visual. I think we see a little bit of that in the Clone Wars. A little bit of outer space lightsaber battling when they need it. But very minimal. It's rare. Beautiful in live action. And Sabine, thankfully, fixes the ship.
Yeah, and then on to the next chapter of the same battle.
Right.
Ahsoka comes back pretty pleased with herself and pleased with Sabine. You can kind of see some of the relief when she sits back down in her seat.
Oh, absolutely. They get into the planet's atmosphere and are greeted by some old friends, the Purgle.
And again, another huge sigh of relief for them. Like, all right, this is our backup, right?
Right. An ally, if you will, that they've had before.
Definitely.
With the fighters still on their tail, They do some weaving, some bobbing, cruise through some Purgles, and escape and land safely in the forest.
Yeah, and I feel like, the Purgles definitely aided them with some concealment, and it allowed them to kinda get down into the fog and get somewhere where they can at least assess all the damage and, hopefully, before they're found out.
Right. And I have to say, I feel like the red leaves, while maybe signifying some dark side relation to that temple we saw in the previous episode, also reminds me kind of cherry blossoms in Japan. Again, hearkening to that imagery that inspired Star Wars to start with.
I can definitely see that. You know me, I love the fall. So I was like, man, they timed it just right. We get our red leaves and they're a little bit foggy, a little bit more weather. But I read that into everything.
After a quick break, they turn Huyang back on, standard Jedi operating procedures. And he breaks the news. It is in fact a giant hyperspace ring capable of long distance and fast travel, capable of maybe going to another galaxy, which has been done before by following the lanes of the Purgle. Wink, wink,
Yeah, I
nudge,
felt like
nudge.
he just came back online and finished reading the Wikipedia entry about where they were headed.
Exactly. And then we close back at that. I don't. It's not really a temple. I guess a site where Balin's skull is waiting with some droid troops and gives them the order to go find our heroes.
Yep. Yeah, and that's kind of ominous for next week. Sets us up for a battle, hopefully, probably right off the beginning, I'm assuming.
Thanks for joining us, Payne. It's good to see you. Payne will actually be our guest in 2 weeks' time, so I'm excited to have him on the show. So yeah, was there anything in particular you really wanted to talk about?
So for me, the at the beginning we see, like we talked about, Sabine's doing her training, and even last week, with the first two episodes, there's something between Sabine and Ahsoka that's kind of a little bit of a barrier between them right now. We see Ahsoka being really stoic and you know just real uh, kind of firm, but not really open. I would say during their training, super just the facts, professional. And by the end of the episode, when they have to work together to survive, like I said, Ahsoka sits down and has that relief, and not just because of her success on her skywalk, but together they were able to work together and meet the at least get to a safe spot then. And I think that we see that trust being built um, through the actual working together rather than just the training. At the beginning, I was kind of like, man, I hope that I'm new to these characters for the most part. I don't know Ahsoka very well, like many of you do. And so I was like, I hope that, she's a little bit more open, a little less wooden, I guess I would say. And we see that by the end of the episode, which made me happy because I'm here for the whole ride. So I'm ready to get more into these guys.
Oh, absolutely. Uh, there's been a lot of conversation about how Rosario Dawson doesn't feel as open as the Ahsoka they remember from the cartoon. But I think people kind of forget that it's been 10 years since the end of Rebels. And
Oh yeah.
these characters have had a relationship that we missed and it didn't go well. So for her to jump back into these relationships, she's going to be standoffish, and I think she's trying her best to pretend to be the good master.
Well, and she talks about last week how she kind of, she walked away from Anakin and then later walked away from Sabine, and that's definitely playing into this. Also, how do these guys know each other? Through fighting battles and wars. And so think about the trauma. If you want to get into that part of what could be going on too, that changes the way that you interact with people. If you've been through it together, or if some of you missed some of it. They went through some stuff alone because they obviously been separated for a while.
Oh, absolutely. And we don't know what Ahsoka has seen on her own and Sabine on her own. And how did those experiences also weigh in on how they are going to interact with each other?
Absolutely. And, we see everybody's still, though it's been a decade, they're still kind of really reeling from, in a way, losing Ezra at the end of Rebels. We see people looking longingly at his belongings, and Sabine replays the message from him. Everybody's kind of still like that's unresolved for them.
Oh,
Um, and they lost him right after they lost Kanan. So think about all of that on top of everything else. There's definitely some stuff to work through for them, and some trust being built as adults now, really.
right. And, the last time we saw Ahsoka in animation, really doing something, she was battling her former master, Darth Vader, and she saw the man that she loved, who was open and offbeat and a different kind of Jedi, turn into this really terrible thing. And so, even though she's not a Jedi and will let you know, I think she's maybe trying to play a little bit more by the rules.
For sure, for sure. Um, and I think that plays into what Bricks put in the chat, being a reluctant master. Um, yeah, she's carrying a lot. She didn't get to finish that training. She definitely wants Sabine to trust her, but we see her lose that trust in Anakin when he turns. That's kind of, trying to think of, why did that happen? And will it happen to me? Am I ready for this? I didn't finish my own training. There's all kinds of stuff that could be playing into it.
Right. And, Brick here in this comment really says it. More than anyone, she has a sense of the weight of the dark side impacting the galaxy. I mean, she's seen it from an angle that many of these characters haven't.
Yeah, just from being in her Jedi Academy.
Right. And I know you haven't seen that stuff, so that's kind of a little bit outside of your point of view, but it is kind of an interesting to consider.
Definitely.
I just kind of want to bring up a couple more images here. This shot I just thought was incredible. Just kind of the sparseness, but the beauty of the ring and the planet behind it. There's
Definitely.
room for some beautiful cinematography in Star Wars, and I think, love it or hate it, The Last Jedi was cinematography.
Yeah, I don't think you can deny that.
Here's a look at our fighters. Again, that World War II aesthetic with the cockpit and just it's lived in. Something that I think we missed in so much of the prequels was a lived-in galaxy.
Definitely. And even the yellow and the red paint really kind of throw back to that era.
Right. And if you look in the background, it's real blurry, trying to capture an image out of motion. The other fighters are a different scheme. So this particular fighter is important. I think this might have been Shin's or Maruk. Again, a nice way for the pilots to customize their ship. Unless, you're a brainless drone who's going to be shot down. That's your role.
Yeah, I think these feel more authentic to me than all of the mirror shiny things from the prequels.
Oh, 100%. I refuse to disagree with that. And of course, Ahsoka out on the ship with her lightsabers ablaze, getting that beautiful reflection off the ship itself.
Absolutely. And then we see her use the lightsaber on the ships in order to defend her ship.
Might as well pipe in Brick's comment here. Those old relics, like relics from the Clone Wars era, but mods to make some of these junkers turned racers in Star Wars Resistance. Kind of an interesting cartoon. I didn't watch it all the way through. I think I was super Star Wars burned out from trying to watch everything. I mean, everything before The Rise of Skywalker. All right, let's quick look at our friends, the Purgles. They're in the gaseous clouds. I kind of wonder if that's the same gas that we were seeing in the fueling station in Rebels when we first see the characters. Like they're feeding on that for their travels.
That would make sense. Based on also where they're trying to get to.
Yeah, I will say that thought literally popped in my head as I finished that sentence was like, oh, they gotta fuel those 6 hyperdrive engines that they're installing. Well, 7, excuse me, 7.
Yeah. I mean, we've been set up to meet Thrawn. We know we're going to meet Thrawn, and I think we're getting teased about Ezra whether or not we're going to meet him. We know we're heading to wherever they ended up.
So Brick just pointed this out. I didn't know this. The main character's dad is one of the senators that Hera was dealing with in this episode.
Oh, we're connecting everything together again.
Sometimes I hate when Star Wars does the small galaxy thing where everybody knows everything. But at the same time, it's nice when it works naturally.
Yeah. It's a world we're familiar with, so it's easy to keep connecting it. And it can definitely get overdone sometimes, but these little winks, I think, are a good way to continue to weave the stories together.
Right. I think when those winks work naturally, it's really great. Like having, knowing that character's dad is a senator, it kind of works because we know Hera has to deal with senators. Where I feel like Yoda hanging out with Chewbacca in the Clone Wars doesn't work as well for me.
Yeah, well, and then they forgot they knew each other later on.
Right. That would have been a real awkward situation. Or Han's ability to speak Wookiees is terrible. I know it has the language has a name, and I'm really embarrassed that I don't know it off the top of my head. If you don't know the character, doesn't affect your viewings. Absolutely, it's fun if you know it, but if you don't need to, it's not as punishing. Sherry Sherry Wook. I'm probably getting that wrong, but thank you so much, Brick. Brick is a fountain of knowledge. If I learned anything last week in all our failed attempts to do this, that man knows his stuff. So yeah, I thought this was just kind of a fun episode. For me, this felt very Star Warsy. Like it felt like we were finally really building the stakes and the scope. Or yeah, we were introduced last week, but this felt like putting the chess pieces in their initial positions.
Yeah, we got our foundation, and now we're moving forward. I'm excited to see where it goes. We got a little bit more Chopper, not as much as I love Chopper. You guys, he's maybe my favorite from Rebels. We recently, the 2 weeks before Ahsoka premiered, we watched Rebels, and that was my first viewing. And I kept telling Chris, thank you for watching this with me. For years I was like, I don't want to watch the cartoons. I'm good with the stories I got, but I really enjoyed it. And Chopper's somebody that I'm like, I can feel like a Chopper sometimes.
Right. And I don't know how often we actually see a droid curse, but Chopper has a potty mouth for sure.
Yes.
And it's just enough that you know it and you can hear it and you know what he's saying.
Yeah, I think he's like talking to probably a teenager, I would say, that kind of, behind mom and dad's backs, but they're still going to finish their chores. That's Chopper for me, and I think it's hilarious.
But he's brave enough to go in your face.
Oh, yeah. But they know they can rely on him.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, he might murder a bunch of people in the midst of whatever he's working on, but he's still going to get it done.
Clearly, Asimov's laws do not apply to Chopper.
No, not at all.
So, at this point, 3 episodes in, where do you think we're going with Ahsoka?
I mean, I feel like it's we know that we're getting Thrawn. We've seen, the casting and stuff. We may not get him until the last episode or the episode before the last, but I feel like um we've been teased enough about Ezra. I think we're going to have some resolution to his story in one way or the other, whether he comes back and is saved or we find out that he did die a hero.
Right. And I can't help but think of Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight. You know, die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. You almost kind of wonder if Ezra survived in the grasp of Thrawn, what is left of Ezra?
Oh, definitely, because we know he struggled with the pull of the dark side all through Rebels, much much like Anakin, but I think in a more they fleshed that out better for me, Ezra's pull to the dark side, but still living in that light side. And so we know that that could definitely be still be there wherever he's at, wherever he ended up, and he, with being with Thrawn, definitely could have just gone all the way to the dark side. Um, yeah, I'm excited to see that. Like I said, I think that we have to have that now with just the teases for the 3 episodes so far.
Right. I know I think it's died off and people are now looking at someone else, but a lot of theory of our Inquisitor was that it was Ezra.
Yeah, I read that. I was trying, me and spoilers. I don't love them. So I was trying not to get a ton, but I had seen that on X, which, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Um, and a few things on Reddit where people were talking about it's got to be Ezra, but we'll see.
I don't think it makes sense that Ezra would somehow be back and Thrawn isn't.
No, I think that if Ezra was the Inquisitor, um, then we would be doing a disservice to him by not talking now about the conflict that he would have knowing that he was searching for and fighting his friends. Even
Right.
if he had gone dark side, I think we would then see the opposite side of that story with that pull to the light side. I mean, he loved them. They were his family. And I don't think, I would be mad if it turns out that he was the Inquisitor and we didn't get to talk about that.
I agree
Yes,
with
highly
highly.
articulated. Absolutely.
That said, if they made it Barris Offee, I would also be like, yeah, but it wouldn't make sense. I know that's a character you don't know, but that was a friend of Ahsoka's who turned. Well, didn't turn. She was always light side, but she framed Ahsoka for an attack on the Jedi Temple that led to
Okay.
Ahsoka's being removed from the Order.
Okay.
So, as much fun as that would be, I don't think it makes sense because Barris Offee did those actions because she felt the Jedi Order lost its way and became warlike when that's not what their role was supposed to be.
Okay.
So, as much fun as that would be, it wouldn't make sense for that character who did this atrocious thing as a statement, an anti-war statement in a way, to then turn to the dark side and be like trying to bring a warlord back.
Yeah.
But it has been time. Time changes all.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
So, any final thoughts on this episode before we kind of wrap this up? I know this kind of went quick.
Yeah, I talked about my big takeaway, and that was kind of that growth of trust and kind of the relaxing of the relationship between Ahsoka and Sabine. And I hope we see that develop some more in Sabine's training. And, obviously she's going to be thrown into some situations as part of her training just because of where we're at in their stories anyway. But it was nice to see that for those characters. And, I'm, like I said, I'm here for the ride. My actual first introduction to Ahsoka was her on The Mandalorian. So those
Right.
couple episodes where she meets Mando and Grogu, and that kind of drew me in. Chris, I know that you love Ahsoka and you've talked about her forever, so it's kind of cool to see that character that you've really kind of connected with too.
And I just gotta say, it's funny to me because you haven't seen the conversations I have. You're not in the discords I am, and you're kind of avoiding a lot of the talk. But for you to be like, I want to talk about the emotional growth in this episode, when so many people have been complaining about the lack of emotion from these characters.
Huh. Well, I saw this 36 minutes that we spent with them this week. So, and like I said, I hope that we see some more of that. It's not just, lasers and lightsabers. We got to know them really well for me during Rebels, and it's cool to see that develop into these more adult situations or relationships and responsibilities for them.
100%. Well, Jess, thank you so much for joining me this week. I know we're going to do this again in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited.
It's a nice way for us to spend our anniversary, I think, is talking about Star Wars on the internet.
I mean, we couldn't have it any other way.
Right. Quick comment popped in here. Let's bring Brick on here. There's shockingly a lot of hinting that it's Ezra being the Inquisitor, but the Thrawn novel and High Republic lore, it makes sense why he'd get back before Thrawn. So there's some hints apparently in the Star Wars lore. Brick, it's not our anniversary yet, but the next time Jessi joins me, it will be.
I'll take that happy anniversary early, though. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
So, thank you again. If you're not done talking Ahsoka this week, I will be on Geek the F Out tomorrow, talking again with the likes of Mega J Retro, Kayla Silva, and none other than Ralph, the casino skunk from Live Action Star Wars, who is producing a Lost documentary. I know you're excited about that, Jessi, the Lost documentary.
I definitely am, yes.
So please check that out. If you're watching this replay, there will be a link to that at the end of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, and please don't forget to let yourself shine.